So that's so interesting.
Oh,
Wow.
it's phenomenal. And I mean, I gotta tell you, I love that place.
That's so nice.
And there are other things. I mean, there's this thing when you walk in, I hope it's still there, that shows you what kinetic energy is all about.
Yeah.
Again, with these little balls, but they go like this whole up and down thing and levers.
Right.
It's amazing. It's
Wow.
brilliant, and it's mechanical, so the kids can
Right, they're doing it all themselves.
Yeah,
That's
it's
fantastic.
must go.
That's really good. They had a great time at the aquarium, by the way. They
Yeah.
loved it, all the hands-on.
This is very
They
interactive.
pet a shark. That was exciting.
Yes, yeah, that is a
The
nice.
jellyfish and stingrays and all the no, it's good. Okay, I didn't know that was right there.
Oh, yeah, gotta go.
It's not too far, actually. It's like 45 minutes, right? It's not so far. So
Not
maybe
too
even
bad.
less.
It depends on traffic.
Stop at Stanford for food. So you can stop in Stanford for food also on the way. Get something there. Okay.
There's a new restaurant in Stanford?
I heard something about that.
What's it called? Napolitana, something.
Right.
It's Milchik. It's obviously Italian. Haven't been there. We just read about
Right.
it.
Yeah, I heard about it. I haven't been, but yeah, that's a good activity. It's a good point. Okay, so good morning, everybody. I see Simeon's on here. I don't know if you could hear us, Simeon. If you are, you can unmute. Feel free. The place where we left off last week was almost towards the end of a very lengthy Be'er Halacha. We read really for almost the whole page here, very small text, which summarized the two opinions that relate to Bein Hashmashos. We saw the opinion of Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Tam's opinion was that Bein Hashmashos begins only 57 minutes after 58, maybe after sunset. Sun goes down. That is one sunset. That's Tchilas Shkia. And then at the end of 3 1/4 meal, you get to Sof Shkia. That's when the year is the Shkia of light. That's a sort of a clever interpretation of the two Gemaras and Shabbos and Pesachim, trying to put them together. And then 3/4 of a meal after that is nightfall. So 72 minutes after dark would be Tzeis HaKochavim. And that's using the calculation that a meal is 18 minutes, approximately 18 minutes. I do want to just point out for those who are listening online, also here, there are different opinions about that. We saw the Ramah had a very clear understanding that it was 18 minutes. But there are other authorities who estimate that a meal is actually a longer period of time. The other opinion has a little bit more popularity is 24 minutes. If that's the case, you just have to adjust the mathematics to account for that. But that is ultimately the same theory in terms of how you break up the meal. 3 1/4 meal, then 3/4 of a meal. You just have to do the math. Obviously, that would take you out further from sunset. But if you look on a website like MyZmanim, you will see calculations for people who make the assumption that it's 24 minutes for a meal. So that is the standard opinion. The one that the majority of rabbinic authorities would tell you is 18. So that's just something I wanted to make sure to mention. The other opinion we saw last week was that of everybody else against Rabbeinu Tam, literally the entire world. The Rambam and the Rif, I think, were not explicit, but many of them commentators read into them that they also agreed with this idea that Shkia begins immediately. Sorry, Bein Hashmashos begins immediately at Shkia. Shkia is not a time window; it's a point in time. It's sunset, and then from there you count 3/4 of a meal, and then at that point it is dark, according to Torah law. We have a stringency to extend it beyond that because we are not sufficiently bikiin, knowledgeable to tell the difference between a medium-sized star and a large star. A large star would be still Shabbos, or if you're on the back end, it would still be Shabbos. And a medium star, though, by Torah law, would be the end of Shabbos, or on the front end, that would be the beginning of Shabbos for sure. We accepted Shabbos always at sunset because it's suffix at that point. But once you get to 3/4 of a mil, which is the equivalent of 3 medium-sized stars, it is now no longer a doubt whether it's Shabbos. It is for sure Shabbos at this point. And we, at the end of Shabbos, have this stringency to wait till 3 small stars, which is a whole separate calculation of how you get to that. But that's why our Shabbos doesn't end, 18 or so minutes, after, or 13 and a half minutes, I should say, after sunset. We wait a little bit longer than that. Okay, and we just talked about adjusting for where you are, time of the year, and the latitude. Okay, the one thing we did not get to, which I was a little terrified maybe to read, but we're going to read it anyways. Let's go back into the Be'er Halacha. In the printout edition that I have here for everybody, I have this beginning, this part. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines up from the bottom of the page. If there's Be'er Halacha, it's very lengthy. In the middle of the line, there's a semicolon. Right before the semicolon, there's a bracket. It's closing a bracket over there. And right after that semicolon is the word velav dafka. Everyone see that? 8 lines up from the bottom of the Be'er Halacha, middle of the line. So here he writes, velav dafka le'inyan Shabbos. This is not just a Shabbos matter. This is really anything that has relevancy to Torah law. Where there's a difference between, for halachic purposes, if there's something online that, there's a difference between day and night. So this whole discussion applies to all laws that are Torah laws at night. And he's very careful here not to talk about rabbinic law. Rabbinic law can define by its very nature can define when something can start. So by rabbinic law, you're allowed to, you have an obligation to, at night, do a particular mitzvah. I don't know, name your rabbinic mitzvah, that's a nighttime mitzvah. So you could really, if assuming the rabbis set up this in the following way, you could probably do that mitzvah from Shkia and be Yotzei. However, when it comes to a Torah mitzvah, for example, Kriyat Shema, the evening Shema, which is a biblical mitzvah, it's putting aside the opening Tosfot in Shas, which is an interesting attempt to justify the minhag that they did say Shema a lot earlier than 3 stars. Most authorities will tell you should at least repeat your Shema once there are 3 stars out in order to ensure that you said the Shema at a time when it is certainly dark, certainly Laila. And therefore ensuring that you can check the box that I really did the Torah mitzvah at the correct and proper time, as opposed to a rabbinic mitzvah where there's a lot more leniency about when you fulfill that after Shkia. So he then says here, Azlina lahachmir, we are very stringent when it comes to Torah mitzvahs at night. We say that the beginning of Shkia begins Bein Hashmashos. So meaning for Shabbos purposes or Yom Tov purposes, you can't do Malacha anymore. And in that period of Bein Hashmashos goes until there are 3 medium-sized stars. As we mentioned, as we mentioned before. In the Sefer Aguda, or you can find it in the commentary of the Mordechai, which is in the back of every standard printing of the Gemara, in chapter 2 of Shabbos, V'ayin Babach, and then also you can find this in the Bach, which is a commentary on the side of the Beis Yosef. Sorry, I skipped the line. They say, we should even be stringent for another opinion, and that is the opinion of the Yereim. The Yereim was Rabbi Eliezer Mimetz. He was a Rishon, a late Rishon, who he had responsa. He had, people asked him questions. And he would respond. And he was from Metz, Rabbi Eliezer Mimetz. So, Ayin Sham, what is the opinion? And apparently, there were many communities that followed his opinion. We'll talk about what his opinion is in a second. And the Magen Avraham seems to also quote the Bach, who's quoting the Yereim. And it seems like the Magen Avraham says, yeah, we should be stringent for the words of the Bach. Even though by the letter of the law, he says you could technically follow Rabbeinu Tam, which is a very huge leniency to follow Rabbeinu Tam, because I mean Shabbos doesn't start until much later than we start Shabbos. But he says, we should be machmir for the Yereim. Okay, that also is very important and determinative. When is day and night by the mitzvah of Mila, because a Mila that's done at night is invalid. A Mila that's done during the day is valid. Achen, hagra dacha shitas harein aniskar leo. The Gra knocks aside the Yereim's position. Re'im is Rabbi Eliezer Metz. He says, let me tell you what he was thinking when he said his opinion. What is his opinion we didn't even get yet. He doesn't mention this here. Oh, he did mention it. Maybe I looked it up separately. 1 second. I'll just finish it and then I'll explain to the Yereim. If he didn't do it here, then I will have to do it. Me'at yoser b'hadlakas haneros k'dilatzes gam shitasa. K'moshe kasavti b'mishnah b'rasif katan chaf gimel. That's where this is. Sorry. Okay. So we'll mention, we're going to mention this not by name in Sifkat Chav Gimel. Okay, so he didn't mention this here. I don't know. I guess I must have looked it up separately. I'm sorry. I thought I was here. The Yereim basically says that the time of nightfall, when you have to stop your malacha, is actually before Shkia. He thinks that there is some incremental period of time. It seems to be a suggestion that you should try to start Shabbos 30 minutes, I don't know, some 18, 20, 30 minutes before. The Yereim thinks that actually that's nightfall already. Now that is a very, very, very limited opinion in the sense that he's the only one who says it, I'm aware of, as opposed to everyone else who basically says that Shabbos really starts at Shkia because that's a Safek Yom Safek Laila. The Yereim thinks that the Safek Yom Safek Laila starts earlier than sunset. That he has a unique individual opinion as to where he's coming from. I don't even think it's sort of related to Plag HaMincha. Plag HaMincha is not nightfall. We'll talk about Plag because that's going to come up in our learning soon. And therefore, people who want to be careful and stringent for the words of Rabbi Eliezer and Metz, which is what many Kehilot are reported to have done, light candles earlier. It is not a crazy theory to believe that I have to do more digging on this, that the Kehilos that start and they have candlelighting 20 or 30 minutes before Shkia, we have usually 18. But if you have anything a little bit more before that, it may have its genesis and origins in being stringent for the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer Mimetz. Because he does report here that there were many communities did try to be stringent for this opinion, and they would light candles a little early. But again, by the letter of the law, that's not the opinion. But whatever, it's not uncommon that over time, certain stringencies were adopted by Jewish communities to try to satisfy various opinions. And so this is where this comes from. Again, without getting into the whole calculations of why he thinks that it starts a little early, it's an odd opinion. Yeah, Simeon, go ahead. Oh, that was just.
Do we have an approximate date for Rabbi Eliezer?
Yeah, Rabbi Eliezer Metz, I believe, was in the 1300s. I'm just going to quickly look it up. Eliezer from Metz. He died. Oh, sorry, earlier than that. So he was a Bali Atosos. He authored the Sefer Yereim. Okay, he died in 1198. So he's living in the 1100s.
He's a Rishon.
He's a Rishon. He was a Rishon who had a Sefer, of Shilas and Chuvas, basically. That's how he became known. No, it's not Shabbos Shuvah. He wrote a Sefer Yereim. The Yereim was a commentary, it was a Perush, basically.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so you have this opinion that's out there, but that's really not one that gets much attention in terms of sort of Me'ikar Hadin Sakalah.
So I have a really stupid question.
Yes.
No matter whose opinion you follow, you're supposed to add a little at the end of Shabbos, right?
Yes, Tosefes
Okay.
Shabbos, yeah.
Okay, so when I have a situation like we're gonna have in the fall, where I have Shabbos and Yontif,
Yes.
Saturday, Sunday, aren't I taking away from Yontif if I'm extending Shabbos?
It's a fascinating question. I don't know the answer. Because
I always wonder why we're doing that, and I always have this tension. Like, when can I put out my candles? I can't do it until after Shabbos, but then.
correct. So in order, because it works like this, because when you light candles for Yom Tov, you could technically light the candles on Yom Tov.
I know.
So because of that,
Okay.
we're like, okay, let's wait till the end of Shabbos for sure.
Okay, but that's a separate thing. It's like, it's just the idea that I'm taking away from Yontif
From Yontif.
when I do that.
Right. So when we do that, we try to actually do it passively. It's a fascinating point. We do it, but when we are mosif, we are doing it passively,
What's that mean?
meaning we do not explicitly, we don't explicitly undercut Yontif. For example, on a day like that where you lead into Yontif at night, you're not supposed to have Shalosh Shudas, late in the day leading into it, because it ruins Yontif. Often, as we do here in the shul all the time, we're eating Shalosh Shudas. We start right before sunset, and then you can continue eating all the way till dark.
Yeah, but then but you still have to make Kiddush, so you're doing that late. If you're eating Shalosh Shudas until dark, that's still your Shabbos meal.
Right, but by doing that, I'm acknowledging that this period is Shabbos.
Okay.
By not making Kiddush yet, I'm saying it's still Shabbos. I'm eating, and it's not Yontif, so I'm like spitting on Yontif, as it were.
Yeah.
So what I'm doing during that time typically is I'm kind of in no man's land. I can't really do malacha for Yom Tov because it's still maybe Shabbos, and I can't prepare for one day to the next. And I also can't, I don't know. You're not allowed to start mentioning Yom Tov because then it can't be Shabbos anymore in the davening. So we're in a twilight zone where it's not here, not there, and that's why usually if you're like in a shul, typically what happens when the time someone's giving a shir, like you don't really. We actually here daven a little bit early. We'll daven sort of before Shabbos is out, because you can daven early. But there are other places that will probably not do that. By the way, they'll say no, it's too much of a contradiction. It's one of the reasons, by the way, on the beginning of Shabbos, that we don't say Kabbalah Shabbos really because of this. Because if Yontif leads into, if the Yontif is ending and Shabbos started, we don't say Kabbalah Shabbos. Because you're in this no man's land. You're singing all these Shabbos, you're singing this, the Shabbos song, and the Chadodi, and Yontif's like, hey, what about me? Like, poor me. There you have to light candles up because you're forced to, because otherwise you're lighting on Shabbos. That's why you have to light it, but that's why you have to have an Eruv Tavshilin to light candles.
Right.
You can't, Eruv Tavshilin is not just for food, it's also for lighting candles. Yes, it's a fascinating point. But to your original question, is there a mitzvah of Tosefes Shabbos at the end of Shabbos leading into Yontif? Because the whole mitzvah of Tosefes Shabbos is Mosif mechol al hakodesh, but there's no chol, right? And that's why you even like the bracha of Havdalah on Saturday night in Kiddush is hamavdil ben kodesh lekodesh. It's not hamavdil ben kodesh lechol. So it's fascinating. I don't know if is there a mitzvah of Tosefes Shabbos. There's also a mitzvah of Tosefes Yontif. Just start Yontif early, but you can't take away from Shabbos. I don't know if there's because there's no fulfillment in Tosefes, at all on a Saturday night. So I never thought about the Shaila until you just brought it up right now.
I mean, if you're starting Shabbos early, if it's a Shabbos leading into Yontif, start Shabbos early. Is that enough? Do you have to still add on at the end?
Do you have to add on at the end? Well, the idea is that you're supposed to, and a regular Tosefes Shabbos mitzvah, beginning and end.
Right. but.
Yeah, in this case, I don't know that you could do that though, because I was saying, Saturday night there's a yontif in this situation. Yes, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that there's meaning it's not a halacha lamaisa question because you're going to do whatever we do anyways.
Right.
But the question is on a sort of technical, theoretical level, is there a biblical mitzvah being fulfilled at this point? Or no, it's canceled as a result of this calendar setup. I just don't know the answer. It's a fascinating question. I happened to speak to my Rebbe yesterday. Maybe I'll have to give him another call. Find out. It's a good question. Fascinating question. Okay, so now let's continue forward. Let's continue forward. But by the way, the next Be'er halacha, I don't want to read the whole thing, but the next one talks about the idea of, do you calculate things, fixed minutes, or do you make adjustments? Assume that the Gemara was talking about, the equinox days, and therefore you have to adjust for, time of the year. How would you calculate that? Just know that there are differing opinions on the question. The general opinion is to make adjustments, based on where you are and whatnot. But whatever, there are opinions on both sides of this issue. Okay. In the Shulchan Aruch, let's return back there. This is our jumping off point. So we had said he had passed like Rabbeinu Tam and said you want to make the whole Bein Hashmashos, the whole period of the whole Shkia period till Bein Hashmashos, you want to make it Tosefes, some of it Tosefes, no problem, whatever you want, just have to do something. And we were up to Sif Katan Chaf Alef, but the very last line of the Mishnah Berurah on page Lamed Gimel, where it says Rotza Lasos Kulo Tosefes. So he says here, because you can make a choice. You want to, you don't want to. It's a very interesting thing. In halacha, you could just make a choice whenever you want. Typically, law doesn't give you choices; tells you what to do. Hainu al yedei dibur. How do I accept Shabbos? By my words, by my dibur. Shehu mekablo alav l'shem tosefes Shabbos. That I am accepting this time as the addition to Shabbos, tosefes Shabbos. That there's another way I can do it. So either I could just say it's Shabbos. See where we're going to? Yeah. We just start over here. These left.
You're on this.
Yeah, sorry. Mishnah Berurah.
Yeah. I thought you're still upstairs.
No.
Okay,
Sorry.
got it.
And shehu mekablo alav l'shem tosefes Shabbos. So I accept it. Say, I'm accepting Shabbos now. Or al yedei amiras baruch hu. Or you say baruch hu. You're in shul. They start davening Marv. They say baruch hu es Hashem, baruch hu es Hashem hamivorach, and I respond. Well, what else am I supposed to think? That I wasn't saying it's Shabbos. Of course, when you respond baruch hu, you're accepting that it's the next day, even if you had more time till sunset, or until in Rabbeinu Tam's case, in the Shulchan Aruch's case, until 3 1/4 meal have passed after Shkia, beginning of Shkia. We'll talk more about the whole thing about answering and davening early in Sif Daled. Look, and if it works to accept in your heart, it's Shabbos. I don't even say it out loud. I just in my heart, in my mind, I think now I'm doing Shabbos. It's Shabbos for me now. So that's a whole question. Zayin lekam b'siman Tav Reish Ches, Siv Gimel, the Haggadah. Take a look over the Tav Reish Ches in the Ramah over there. And he says, take a look also in Reish Lamed Gimel, Siv Yud, in the Ramah over there. The minhagenu shaha'isha hamadlekas neros l'Shabbos, imekabela Shabbos behadlakazon. Did they say that it's Shabbos? They lit the candles for Shabbos. Adlik ner shel Shabbos. What's the whole point of the candles for Shabbos? The candles are so that there's light on Shabbos, so that people don't bump into things, so that people can see their food, etc. You don't have to accept Shabbos when you light candles. But we make an assumption that the assumption is that when a woman lights the candles, that she's accepting Shabbos with the hadlaka, which is why you have to light the candles and then say the bracha Because if
Right.
you have the bracha and the assumption with your saying the bracha is that I'm accepting Shabbos, then you're done. And put the match down and leave and walk away. So that's the assumption. And that's the interesting question. Does Kabbalah Balev work, or do you have to say it? At least with the lighting candles, there's an action attached to it. And therefore, it's not just, maybe you could say it's Kabbalah Balev, but there's a kavana that is being intention that's being displayed by the action of lighting the candles, as opposed to I just in my own heart or my mind I just accept it's Shabbos. That's a question whether or not that's sufficient to trigger the laws of Shabbos. To the extent that you say, what's this matter of? If I think it's Shabbos in my brain, who cares? The question is that can I go back on it, right? Because once you accept Shabbos, you can't go back on it. So if you've accepted it in your mind, can I go back on it now? And I realized I had one more thing I wanted to do. I had the email I need to send, and that matters. Kabbalah Balev, is it mahani or lo mahani? Does it work or not work? Tough reish ches. I wanted to look this up. It's halacha tough reish. Look up my phone. Tough reish ches sif gimel. So this is the laws of the seuda hamafsekes. This is about Erev Yom Kippur. So the Ramah, so the Mishulchan Aruch on the laws of Suda Mafsekes on Erev Yom Kippur, he says in Hifsik me'achilaso be'od hayom gadol. If you stop eating while it's still a little bit of daylight, yachol lachzor v'lechol. You can go back and eat. It's not yet sunset. Kol zman shelo kibel lavatanis, as long as you haven't accepted the fast. If you verbally accept the fast early, it is now Yom Kippur for you. V'ayin lekaman siman taf. Now here the Ramah has the im kibel balev lo have kabbalah. If it's just in your heart, not verbally, it's not, you could still eat. So if you thought like, I'm done. You're done. You're like, I'm going to go brush my teeth and then Yom Kippur. But you never said it out loud. And you're like, you know what? Actually, I could use another cup of water before Yom Kippur starts. The Ramah says, you're good to go because it was the Kabbalah Balev, in Kibbeh Balev, lo have Kabbalah. So you could argue the same thing here, that if you were, Makabel Shabbos just Balev, you might be able to walk it back and do one more email or send one more email before Shabbos. Okay.
Drive to shul.
Well, so if you light candles and you have explicitly in mind that you're not accepting Shabbos, for sure Shabbos didn't start. And when I used to live alone, I believe one of us in our apartment would light Shabbos candles, if I'm not mistaken, because there's a mitzvah to light Shabbos candles. You have no, wife or daughter or what. So I didn't accept Shabbos when I lit the candles. And you could then drive to shul. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Chaf Beis. So Eiz's man, right? Oh, you could choose as much time you want to add to Shabbos. So Mishnah Berurah Chaf Beis says, "V'lo sagi behosafa kol shu." It's not enough to do a kol shu, like a kol shu is like a drop in the bucket or a little tiny. That's not enough of a extension of Shabbos. Yes, think a little more. It's the most vague law I've ever heard. Don't do a little bit, do a little more. There's no number attached to that though. V'shir Tosefes, how much should that be? It says with bein hashmashos, you should add 30 minutes. Something like 30 minutes. Now, I was struggling with this phrase by when I was preparing. What does "im bein hashmashos" mean? I think it means like before bein hashmashos, like with it, like leading up to bein hashmashos. I think he's saying biola kimat chatzi shah. Or is he saying bein hashmashos is 13 and a half minutes? Add to that, enough time so that in total it comes to 30. I am actually not. He says here, actually look at the Be'er Halacha. Let's take a look quickly at the Be'er Halacha. Ezesman. There's Ezesman. Here it is. So take a look. Second large line of the second very wide line on the page of Mishnah Berurah. After the star, it says Ezesman. I am Mishnah Berurah Kasav Nedelo Sagi Kolshu V'chulei. Kein Kasav Arash Beitza Perik Maybe Hamevi V'huba Bebeis Yosef. Rush seems to say this. Don't add a little tiny drop, and the Beis Yosef seems to quote it. And he says here, because of poskim below his bar, Shiro Gemara. The Gemara doesn't talk about what's the number. There's no number. the alcohol panim who pachos michdei shlosha rive meal, but it has to be less than 3/4 of a meal, which is the amount of bein hashmashos exists. The love hache yishar kushas atosos. He said that otherwise there will be still a question that relates to the tosos on the page there. That he says over there, Safik Chashecha, Velchein Satanti, the Mishnah Berurah Chaya Adam, and therefore he paskin the Mishnah Berurah like a Chaya Adam that you should at least do 30 minutes. I don't actually know that. I'd have to look up the Tosfos over there. But bottom line here is that there isn't a clear number. There's no clear number, but the reality is that if you're lighting candles, I would say 18 minutes before. And you have then the Bein Hashmashos too, and it's not even Safik Chashecha. I think you're fine. Honestly, Me'aker Hadin, I don't see how you could have anything more than a small amount. Maybe it's a good idea to add more because you may not want to violate Shabbos, so it's a good idea to give yourself some more time. But there is no shear that is given in the Torah. There's no shear given in the Gemara for this. I would assume that by the letter of the law, even a little bit is technically enough. But good advice to do a little bit more. Okay, I have to look up that Tosos to get a full picture of what he's talking about there. Okay, let's take a look at Gimel. Because remember here, the Shulchan Aruch had said that the shear of Zman Ben Hashmashos is Shlosha Tzrivim, which no one argues with. The question is, when does that Ben Hashmashos start? And that's 1,500. That's the time it takes to walk 1,500 amos. Take a look here. He writes Shlosha Tzrivim meal. The hula erech reva shah. It's approximately a quarter of an hour. Quarter of an hour. Now, quarter of an hour for us is 15 minutes. Okay, it's not crazy. We say it's 13 and a half minutes halachically, if you assume it's 18 minutes. If you assume, for example, that it's 24 minutes as a meal, then 3/4 of a meal would be 24 divided by 4 is 6, so it'll be 18, right? So okay, so whatever, it's le'erech, it's a reva shah. Okay, it's about a quarter of an hour. Okay, and he says here, and the Shulchan Aruch here is really representing the opinion of Rabbeinu Tam and his group of supporters. Aval harbe meharishonim svir lahu, but many of the Rishonim explained v'gam hagra hiskim l'shitasam, as we've already previewed in the Be'er Halacha. The Gra agrees with these many Rishonim. The Bein Hashmashos maskal teifet b'achar tchilas hashkia. The Bein Hashmashos begins immediately when the sun sets. Hainu misha hashachama niskasem he'einenu. When the sun is no longer visible, it's covered from our eyes. V'nimshach zlano k'dei shloshes rivei meal, and then you count 3/4 of a meal. That time, v'achar kach v'samuch lo yotzin. In that time, 3 medium-sized stars will then emerge. And then it's night according to Torah law for all matters. And therefore one should be very cautious and not do any malacha after the sun is no longer visible to our eyes. Even if it's work that is for the purpose of a mitzvah, I want light for my sudas. I got to light some candles. I say, I'll rely on Rabbeinu Tam. No, can't rely on Rabbeinu Tam, even if it's for a mitzvah purpose. You need to make sure to light your candles before the sun sets. Because then it's considered Ben Hashmashos according to almost every opinion. As we've talked about earlier, it's Sif Katan Vav. Do not wait until the last moment. Ideally. At least they agree, they acknowledge it's ideal. But we're going to talk about the next sif in the Shulchan Aruch when he's supposed to light candles. The definition of when you light candles is when the sun is at the tops of the trees. So if you're standing outside, the sun is sort of going lower and lower. It's not quite at the horizon, but when it's at the tops of the trees, we've all seen it, by the way. You think about an image in your mind where you've been somewhere and the sun you can see the sun visible through the tree, meaning it's mostly shady for you, but because the sun has gotten so low that the trees are blocking it from this direction, not from that direction. But you know what he means, like that you're looking, almost you're looking straight out, you're not looking up, and the sun is at the tops of the trees. Okay, we'll estimate what that is when we get there in a moment. Later on the Shulchan Aruch. Well, Misha Machmer Alatzmo, who wants to be stringent upon themselves, and separate themselves even from malacha. Chatzi shah, you should do it 30 minutes before shkia. That's why I think it's 30 minutes when he says it before. O al kol panim shlish shah kodem shkia, or at least a third of an hour before shkia. That's where the shita of 20 minutes comes from. It's all a suggestion, right? It's all the idea of like how long should Ashrelo, gonna do 20, 30, that's extra. We'll talk about the minimum amount that you should ideally light candles. But you want to do 20 minutes before lighting candles, 30 minutes before lighting candles. Ashrelo, praiseworthy is he. Dehu yotzei bazeh yidei shitas kol harishonim, because then you'll fulfill all the opinions of the Rishonim. What's that? That's a veiled reference to the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer Metz, who thinks that there's this idea that Safek Laila starts before Shkia. At some point when the sun is almost set, it is already night, or at least it's Be'er Shmashos, I should say. And therefore, and by the way, you see us in Chaf Aleph in the Shar Hatzin at the bottom, he says, Hainu afilu shitas Rabbeinu Eliezer Metz. If you like 20, 30 minutes before, you're good even according to him. Afilu nisbor, the meal who Chaf Dalud minute, even if you assume that a meal is 24 minutes, V'yotze bazem yidina gam tosefes Shabbos, lahar be'achronim, then you'll fulfill Tosefes Shabbos even according to many of the Achronim. Okay, bottom line is, if you're lighting 20, 30 minutes before, certainly 30 minutes before, Ashrelo, everyone will be happy. All the Rishonim are smiling down on you. Well, even Motzoi Shabbos, what about after Shabbos? I ver halacha shebe'arnu sh'shem haposkim the lekule alma hashir d'shloshos v'vimil mishtane lefi hazman v'hamakom. That everybody agrees that when it comes to the end of Shabbos, things depend upon where you are. That 3/4 of a meal changes based on the time of the year and the place where you are located. They were talking in the Gemara about Bavel, where they were located, these rabbis in the Gemara. And they were talking about during the spring, the autumnal and the spring equinox, when the days equal, right? The amount of day and night are equal. So you have to adjust that, right? So you have to adjust the calculation based on where you are, what time of the year it is. Uvim komo senu, in our places, Poland, shenote letzad tzfon ha'olam, we're tipping towards north of the world. Misarech harbe yoser. I've never been to Poland. Shabbos ends very late from what I hear. But I don't know, you were in London once for Shabbos? Something like that?
Yeah.
It's late, right? In the summer?
I remember it was so long ago.
It was
No,
long.
we don't go in the summer.
The winter, probably ends early then,
Yeah.
right? So my grandparents lives in Montreal, so even here, so Montreal in the summer, Shabbos ends later than it does here, but in the winter it ends earlier than it does here. Not by much, honestly, but the reason is the more north you go, in the summertime the sun is out for longer, in the wintertime it's out for much less.
Toronto. I remember my niece lived in Toronto for a while, and she couldn't call me Saturday night till like 10:30 something.
Right, exactly. It's west and it's north. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Shabbos in Columbus, I remember the latest would be about 9:50 something, in the 9:50 something range. Yeah. Yeah, people complain out here that it's it's 9:15 or whatever. Yes. Yeah. Okay.
It also depends on which side of the time zone you're on. If you're on the,
Yes, that's true. But once you cross over to if you go to the central time zone, right? You go to Chicago, so now you're not so it's not so late anymore.
right.
Even though you've right. Yeah, it's more like in New York for the time. Okay. So anyways, he says we're in the north. So be very careful. You can't do malacha at the end of Shabbos. You wait a long time. I ask Rabbi Will Yamens, Rabbi Yoshua Yamens, right? Will, who grew up in this community, he was a rabbi a few years in Edmonton, Alberta. Shabbos ends there at who knows when, because it's just so north. Ask him what time Shabbos ended. If I'm not mistaken, there are people, I don't know, is that community or a different community where I think they daven, because you can daven at a certain point. I think that they just went to bed and they think they made Havdalah in the morning. Like, what are you going to do? Like, I'm not waiting up till, 12, 1 in the whatever it is, I want to go to sleep. I want to have a regular life. I don't know how they go to sleep when the sun's still peeking through the window. But anyways, so what do you have to wait till? Until 3 small stars. And we'll talk more about the 3 small stars when we get to Siman Reish Tzadi Gimel, which is about Havdalah. That's a chumrah, because we're not sure about what are 3 medium stars. So we wait till 3 small stars. And we'll talk about that more when we get to that topic. Okay, so at the end of Shabbos, we're not like, we don't just wait 13 and a half minutes. We wait more. But the reality is that everything depends on where you're located. Let's take a look at Chaf Dalid, Kodem Halayla, and its idea that it's the time it would take 1,500 amot before nightfall, the time it would take to walk. Chaf Dalid, Kodem Halayla, Laila Nikra min HaTorah, turn the page, L'chol Davar, that it's nighttime for sure for all matters. Mishiyeru Shlosha Kochav, when you see 3 stars, and I would add in here medium stars. Large stars does not constitute nighttime according to the Gemara. V'ayin the Be'er Halacha, and take a look more at the Be'er Halacha for more iyun about this topic. That's I'm just looking at it's really, it's all the same. It's a lot of similar discussions here about ensuring to wait extra amount of time to make sure that you don't violate Shabbos. Yeah. Okay. Fine. Okay. Now let's introduce the next part here. We're not going to finish this whole piece, but it's a very important one because we all did this past Shabbos. We'll all do this coming Shabbos. Many of us have done this before. Now we're in the Ramah back upstairs. You want to make Shabbos early, not before sunset, right? When it's sunset, it's Shabbos whether you like it or not. Shabbos starts against your will if you don't want. From plag hamincha, which is defined halachically as 10 3/4 hour into the halachic day by Shaos Zmanios. You split the day into 12 equal parts. 10 3/4 hours into that is plag hamincha. Historically, plag hamincha was the time when the korban tamid was shalom ben harbayim. The afternoon tamid was completely done. That whole avoda was done. That's why some people, Rabbi Yehuda, one Tana, believes that mincha needs to be done by that point, and that at that point you can even start saying Mariv, because that korban is done, and now you could do, even though that's the evening tefillah, it's okay according to Rabbi Yehuda to start early before it starts. It's evening, because it's not about when the sun sets or not. It's really that now that korban is done, and now the evening service of removing the ashes, is more relevant to the picture. So then he says here, Harishus biyado, from plag hamincha, so an hour and a quarter before sunset, you may, if you would like, accept Shabbos at that point. And he says, come on, take a look later on at Siman Reish Samech Zayin, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But this is the earliest one could start Shabbos, plag hamincha. The Mishnah Berurah here says, Chaf Hey, Harishus biyado, v'ne'asar ba'asiyas malacha, and you can be, forbidden from doing malacha. Meaning, if you accept Shabbos at that point, it is now forbidden by law, and I'm careful not to use the phrase Torah law here, that it's forbidden by law to do malacha. Maybe it's a violation of a positive commandment of doing like once you accept Tosefes Shabbos, then you violate it. It's a violation of a positive of Tosefes. But at best here, talking about violating in terms of the negative of the Rabbanon, of the additions to Shabbos. But you wouldn't have to bring a chatas, a sin offering, for violating during this period before sunset for sure, where it's clearly all Tosefes Shabbos. Now, he says here, if you accept Shabbos before Plag HaMincha, you light candles, you accept it verbally, you're doing everything that you got to do to make sure, it's Shabbos. It's 2 PM. It's Shabbos. Ein b'Kabbalah so klum. You could say it, you could yell it to the moon, you could yell it to this, you could yell it to the neighbors. Doesn't work. That Kabbalah is nothing. Uplag hamincha nikra shower via kodem ha'erev. As I mentioned a moment ago, plag hamincha is 1.25 hours before night, before sunset. V'ayin le'el b'sin reish lam gimel, which we all learned together. If you remember about the laws of Mariv, dehu sha'os zmanios. You have to use sha'os zmanios in calculating this. Dahainu bein shahayom aruch o katzar. Whether or not the day is long or short, you have to adjust appropriately. Mischalek liyud beis chalokim. 12 equal parts of the day, and then you can make the calculation from there. V'chelek urevia, 1 part and a quarter, kodem ha'erev hu plag hamincha. That's when plag hamincha is calculated. Gam kasavnu sham. We also said in that statement about Mariv, the yesh deos ben aposkim im shara uvia hazo hu kodem ashkia o kodem tzeis kochavim. There is an opinion. There is an opinion that it's 1.25 hours before tzeis kochavim. Okay, or standardly, we would say it's 1.25 hours before sunset, but 2 opinions exist here. Generally there's an argument about, do you break the show zmanios from Hanetz Chama, sunrise to shkia, sunset, or alos hashachar, dawn, until tzeis kochavim, which in some ways are parallels to each other because the sun is not visible in either one. But there starts to be some rays of light, and here there's a tiny bit of ray of light, as it's about to descend all the way below, the light's going to be all the way gone. So the question is, how do you mischalek the time?
Excuse me, but Rav,
Yeah.
didn't you just teach?
Well, Simeon, you cut out there. Can you say that again? It's my internet. Actually, I had good service today. Simeon, it cut out and we're not hearing you.
I said, did you not teach that according to Rabbi Yehuda, we may daven Mariv at Plag?
Yes, that's correct.
And obviously at Plag, it could be, you need the suntan lotion. The sun could be really
right.
hot.
Right, that's correct. Everything you're saying is correct. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No. That's why. That's the earliest you could do Tosefes Shabbos. No one's going to say you're chayav achatas if you violate a malacha during that time period, but you're allowed to accept Shabbos only as early as that. And it probably does relate to the fact that you can't really, even from a davening perspective, say the tefillos of Mariv until Plag HaMincha, according to Rabbi Yehuda, who's the earliest, opinion. So that's the earliest you can accept Shabbos. Before that is not relevant. Not relevant to have that discussion. You can't say it's Shabbos because according to no other metric could you say it's the next day. Okay. He says, "Al kain le'inyanenu v'di'avadim kibel alatzal l'shem tosefes Shabbos ad shor v'yeh kodem hashkia yesh l'hachmer yesh l'lasas malach." So look. It was a machlokas. How early is Plag HaMincha? If you accept Shabbos 1.25 hours before Shabbos starts, before sunset, then you should refrain from malacha at that point. But if you accept Shabbos at 1 PM, you could go ahead and keep doing malacha. It's fine. It's not a problem. Even if you really meant it, it doesn't mean anything. Where this could mean something. Because you could this is ridiculous. This is the most ridiculous thing. Why would you accept Shabbos at 1 PM? This will relate to a sin we'll talk about soon, which is Yom HaMe'unan. If it's a cloudy day and you accepted Shabbos early, it's okay. It's almost dark, so you accept the Shabbos. Then the storm clears up or the clouds stuff, and you're like, oh, the sun, it's not even. It clearly must not have been even at the time of the day of Plag HaMincha, right? The angle of the sun. Therefore, what I said was nonsense. And now, actually, you know what? I have another 30 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and use them now. So that's where it could be a more relevant discussion. In our setting where we have, clocks and watches and phones that tell us everything, exactly to the precise second, I'm not so sure how relevant this is about making a mistake, saying Shabbos, accept Shabbos way too early. What you should be careful is if you're lighting candles too early. So, for example, Plag HaMincha these days, somewhere around the 6:45, 6:50-ish time period. We daven here at 7. One should not light candles beforehand, and say the bracha for Lahadlik Ner Shel Shabbos before Plag HaMincha. It's inappropriate. It's not. You can't say this is a light for Shabbos. This is. You would need to wait until at least Plag HaMincha they make the bracha for the candles. So that's also a relevant way. So if you are going to shul at 7 and you're going to light candles before you go, you have to at least make sure that you've crossed over Plag to light the candles. Okay. It's 8:36. We're going to pause here. We'll finish this discussion of Plag HaMincha next week, but we'll take a look at the Be'er Halacha about this whole topic about being makdim the Shabbos earlier. It's an interesting concept that you can accept Shabbos, make kiddush and every value. You can make kiddush, which is a doraisa. How does that work? You make kiddush, it's a doraisa mitzvah, and the sun is still out. So quote Simeon, and I still need suntan lotion. Especially if kiddush is a doraisa that needs to be fulfilled on Shabbos, can you really do it when it's Tosefah Shabbos? So there are all discussions that are worthy and interesting that we'll need to have. We'll pause here. Next week we'll also continue Siv Gimel, which talks about when is the time to light candles, like the ideal time to light candles, right? We talk about that the sun is at the top of the trees. There are other simanim if it's a cloudy day that have to do with chickens and about what the chickens are doing. Based on their behavior, you can figure out when it's time to light candles. And if you don't have them, you can rely on the ravens. So we're going to have a little bit of an interesting, fun time next week. So don't miss it. And then we'll talk about what happens if you accept Shabbos early with shul, with davening. And perhaps more interestingly, what happens if I don't go to shul, but everyone else daven in the community? Is it now Shabbos for me against my will? And that's a fascinating topic that we'll have to talk about.
Wait, I hope not.